contact! Max Verstappen into the side of George Russell!
A moment of madness. A moment of head loss. A moment that shouldn't have had a major impact on the grand scheme of the season, right? 11 points thrown away in a split second. But did those points really cost Max Verstappen the championship? Let's talk. Before we explain the impact of Spain, let's take a quick look at his results in the first 8 races prior, where he had 2 wins and a further 2 podiums, giving him 144 points up until that point. This left him a measly 20 points behind Lando Norris, but also 34 points behind championship leader at the time, Oscar Piastri. Max had had a notably strong start to the season, with the obvious highlights being his wins in Japan and Imola, both showing off his undeniable ability behind the wheel. Max is also no stranger to a controversial moment on track, at times blurring the lines between hard fair racing and reckless driving, something we have seen much less of in recent years. But that's where we arrive in Barcelona. After qualifying in P3 on the Saturday, Max overtook Lando at turn 1 to move into P2, a position he would hold on to until lap 13, where the superior performance of the McLaren would begin to show its hand against the Red Bull. It was here when Red Bull unknowingly made a decision that would unravel everything. In order to try and catch the McLarens, they opted for an alternate strategy and went for a 3-stop with 2 soft tyre stints split up by a medium tyre stint in the middle. This inevitably left them with little to no flexibility for the rest of the race, as they were left with just a singular set of hard compound tyres, whilst every other driver had a fresh or very lightly used set of soft tyres. This decision would ultimately come to backfire on Max and Red Bull on lap 55 of 66, when Kimi Antonelli's Mercedes decided it had had enough and was done for the day. Unsurprisingly, every team pitted for a fresh set of softs for the final stint of the race. Everyone except for Max, that is, who had to pit onto his hard tyres. After already voicing his frustration over the team radio, on lap 60, Max would have a major moment coming around the final turn on the safety car restart, leading to him losing his P3 to Charles Leclerc as they crossed the start-finish line. And thanks to him losing the rear end, he compromised his top speed coming down the main straight. This left him vulnerable for a very eager George Russell to make an ambitious move up the inside going into turn 1, ultimately pushing Max off track, who then rejoined in front of George seconds later. This is where Red Bull made their second big mistake of the race, when on lap 64, Max's race engineer, GP, instructed him to give the position back to George Russell, as the incident was currently under investigation and the team feared that the 10-second penalty typically given out for this move would cost them dearly. However, it's fair to say that Max did not take this very well in the slightest, immediately seeing red and yelling back over the team radio that he was ahead and that he should not need to give the position back, which ultimately led to this moment.
Oh, contact! Max Verstappen into the side of George Russell!
As Max was seemingly letting George by, he had a change of heart midway through and decided he wasn't going to use his steering wheel for the first half of the corner, instead opting to slam into the side of George Russell's car and keep the position for himself. To make matters worse for the team, the stewards had already come to the decision that they were not going to punish Max for the incident that occurred on lap 60. But the stewards were not going to be letting Max off of this one, immediately slapping him with the exact 10-second penalty that Red Bull were attempting to avoid by telling Max to give up the position to George. This took him from P4 on track when he crossed the line all the way down to P10, costing him 11 points. And although that is of course a significant chunk of points to lose, at this point in the year it didn't feel like those 11 points were really going to matter all that much come the end of the season. At the end of the day, Max was going up against a car that was miles ahead of any other car in the field with that McLaren, with 2 drivers who were more than capable of winning with the machinery they had, as proven by their sheer level of dominance up until this point. Whilst Max was in a car that on its day could win, but was also just as capable of being 30 plus seconds off the pace of the leader. Don't get me wrong, this is definitely the most high profile moment he had, but it's definitely not the only time he watched as points went down the drain. In round 11 in Austria, just 2 races later, came the next misstep. The Red Bull Ring had been a happy hunting ground for Max over the course of his entire career, picking up multiple wins and podiums here, being his most successful track he's ever raced on. Unfortunately, this year the Red Bull just didn't quite gel with the track this time round, qualifying in P7 on the Saturday, consistently being half a second slower than the McLarens over a single lap, whilst also backing out of his final lap of Q3. Moving on to race day, where his P7 start would be converted into about 17 seconds of racing, as Kimi Antonelli dove into turn 3 with little to no control of his car, crashing into the side of Max and ending his race prematurely. Although this situation was much more out of Max's hands, the butterfly effect of him not finishing his final lap of Q3 took him from potentially qualifying on the first or second row of the grid right into the path of Kimi Antonelli's car. Although you can't exactly quantify how many points were lost during the race, you can confidently say that if he finished that race incident-free, he would have more than likely finished somewhere within the top 6. It doesn't quite end there either, as we go into round 12 at Silverstone just one race later. After qualifying on pole in one of the tightest qualifying sessions of the year, Max held off the charging McLaren of Oscar Piastri in majorly mixed conditions up until lap 8, and then chopped and changed positions with Lando Norris until a safety car was called on lap 14 due to poor racing conditions. He would manage to survive this safety car restart, holding on to P2, but a second safety car immediately after the restart did not bring the same luck. On lap 21, as the safety car was brought in, Oscar Piastri slammed on the brakes, causing Max to have to take avoiding action and slow to an almost complete stop to avoid colliding with the race leader. Whether or not what happened next was due to Max showing his frustration or if it was his tyres were too cold, we'll never know, but as he rounded turn 15, he put his foot down on the accelerator, and this happened. Usually so imperious in the rain, he made an uncharacteristic mistake and dropped all the way from 2nd place to 9th in a matter of seconds. To his credit, he did well to save the car from a complete spin and costing him more positions, but this definitely hampered how the rest of his race would go. He was now forced to fight back through the field in interchanging conditions, instead of being able to fight for a podium like he was prior to his mistake. He would end up recovering to finish in P5 thanks to well-timed strategy calls by Red Bull and the fact that some of the cars in front of him were almost having nosebleeds being as high up as they were that late in a race. During this part of the season, McLaren were the dominant force, with this race being the second of 4 consecutive 1-2 finishes for the team. However, big change was coming to Red Bull much sooner rather than later.
Breaking news this morning that Christian Horner has been sacked by Formula One's Red Bull Racing.
A day most never thought would come, Christian Horner was relieved of his duties prior to the Belgian Grand Prix, a change that was brought along with what seemed like a sense of relief from many within Red Bull. The team would actually start off the new era with a sprint win and a P4 finish in the feature race in Spa, but they would then hit a new low in Hungary. Max just never quite seemed to have any form of grip over the weekend whatsoever, and his quali showed that, qualifying down in P8. Yet somehow the weekend would only get worse for Red Bull from here. Max would go on to finish in P9, 1 minute and 12 seconds behind the lead. And to add insult to injury, he finished behind the sister team V-Carb in a car driven by Liam Lawson, who was his teammate for about 3 whole hours at the start of the season before being demoted to V-Carb in Japan. It seemed like more than ever that Max Verstappen was no longer in any form of championship fight, as he sat on 187 points, a mammoth 97 points behind leader Oscar Piastri heading into the summer break. Even after coming out of the summer break into his home race in Zandvoort, a P2 finish would still see him bleed more points to Oscar, now sitting 104 points behind him in the championship after 15 of 24 rounds. It was fair to say that the dream of winning 5 in a row was well and truly gone. Unless your name is Max Verstappen, that is. Round 16, Monza. Max takes yet another pole position, and this time he converts it into a very comfortable 20-second win, 94 points. Round 17, Azerbaijan. Both McLaren struggle in qualifying and the race, with Oscar even DNFing on lap 1, all whilst Max cruised to potentially the easiest pole and win he will ever get, 69 points. Round 18, Singapore. Max would manage to qualify and finish ahead of both McLarens, finishing P2, 63 points. Round 19, Austin. Max would take out the maximum amount of points you can over a sprint weekend, accumulating 33 points, whilst the McLarens tripped over each other in the sprint race. With Oscar Piastri struggling, Max gained a massive chunk of points. 40 points. He can't keep doing this, right? Like, he actually can't come back from 104 points and really win the championship, right? Round 20. Mexico. Max is finally beaten by a McLaren again. This time it's Lando Norris, who overtakes his teammate to take the lead of the championship by 1 point. But Max still gains points as he finishes in what could be a very important P3, 36 points. Round 21. Brazil. Lando Norris takes out the maximum 33 points from a sprint weekend. And even with a mighty impressive pit lane to podium race, Max can only manage to score 20 points this weekend. 49 points. Just when we thought that Max was really about to do the unthinkable, Lando picks up his form and puts one hand onto the championship trophy with just 3 rounds left. Maybe it was just too much of a stretch for Max this time. Round 22. Vegas. Lando Norris continues his great run of form by putting his McLaren on pole in treacherous conditions, but Max has made sure to keep himself close by, putting his Red Bull on the front row alongside Lando. On race day, Max would go on to overtake Lando going into turn 1 during the race and would go on to convert this into a win, with Lando crossing the line in second place. 42 points. With just 2 races left to go, even with one of them being a sprint race, Max would almost need some form of miracle if he were to win the title from here. Well, I guess that works then. In a major twist of events, McLaren were handed a post-race double disqualification for excessive skid plank wear, now cutting the lead to a much more achievable 24 points with just 2 rounds remaining. Round 23. Qatar. Oscar Piastri finally seems to find his form again in the sprint qualifying, where he takes pole, with Lando in P3, but unfortunately Max was only in P6, which he would go on to convert into a P4. In qualifying, Max would qualify P3 behind Lando and Oscar, but luck would be on his side on Sunday. The FIA mandated a 25-lap maximum stint, meaning over 57 laps the teams would all have to stop twice. And after a safety car came out on lap 7, every team decided to pit. Everyone except McLaren, that is. With neither of them pitting, Max was effectively handed P1 thanks to it being a free stop behind the safety car, which he would go on to convert to a crucial win. And Lando? P4. And now Max was also standalone in P2 in the championship. 12 points. Round 24. Abu Dhabi. After an intense season, it all came down to the final race. 12 points is all that separates Max and a 5th consecutive driver's title. Jumping straight into qualifying, Max and Lando both looked on the pace from the very start of the session, but pole position could only go to one driver, Max Verstappen. Finishing off the season with his 8th pole position, all he would need to do is win on the Sunday and hope that Lando would finish off the podium. Race day. Max gets off to a good start and maintains P1, whilst Lando loses P2 to his teammate. All Max needs to do now is to hold on to his position and hope that Charles Leclerc can put the pressure on and overtake Lando and take that final podium position. After 58 laps, Max crosses the line to take the win. But where was Lando? Did he finish on the podium? Or did Max just complete the greatest comeback the sport has ever seen?
And after 24 rounds, Lando Norris is the Formula One World Champion!
2 points. That's all that separated Max and Lando at the end of the season. From being 104 points behind the lead after round 15, it was just 2 points that stood between Max and completing the most improbable and unlikely title comeback Formula One has ever seen. So this begs the question, did this moment cost Max Verstappen the championship? No, It did not. So many pieces have to fall into place to win a title. Max wasn't the only driver to lose points throughout the year. Of course, he had the most high-profile loss of points in Spain, but all three of the contenders lost points through their own fruition. Lando Norris lost at least 10 points after his crash in Canada with teammate Oscar Piastri after trying to overtake him for P4. He also DNF'd from P2 in Zandvoort thanks to an oil leak with just 7 laps to go, losing him 18 more points. Oscar Piastri DNF'd in Baku after jumping the start, going into anti-stall and then crashing 5 corners later. And of course, both McLaren drivers lost 18 and 12 points respectively through the disqualification in Vegas. So no, one moment did not cost Max Verstappen the championship. His season ebbed and flowed like everyone else's, and he lost and gained points just like the other contenders. Unfortunately for him, the mountain was just too big to climb this season. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. I've been Wheel Talk, we've had a real talk. I'll see you guys in the next video.